I'm Ashley McAlpine, and I am the Fraud Prevention Manager here at TMG. This week for Fraud Prevention Friday, we are joined by Marianne De Dios, who is our CEO of Coopera. And last week we talked a lot about some of the ways that we see Hispanic Americans can fall prey or victim to fraud schemes. And so this week I thought it would be really good for us to talk about some of the tips that can be used. So Marianne, what do you see that consumers can actually be utilizing to prevent themselves from falling victim?
Sure. So I'm happy to share a few tips, and I will say that the FTC, definitely the Federal Trade Commission, puts a lot of information, a lot of tips. So some of our tips come via the FTC. One particular opportunity is to always question any too good to be true type, I guess, communications that come your way, and specifically for Hispanic consumers, to pay attention, even though somebody may speak Spanish and it may seem that they share their culture, what they might be offering could potentially still be fraudulent. And there's a lot of cases where, unfortunately, it can be Hispanic individuals trying to lure other Hispanics into a bad situation. So that would be one. Always, question that regardless of if somebody speaks your language or shares your culture. I would say never sign anything you don't understand or that someone is forcing you to sign. That can happen a lot with the language barrier. You may have, again, somebody kind of sharing something completely in Spanish, but when it comes time to sign something, it could be in English. And if you don't understand it, then of course, don't sign it. I would say if you're looking at purchasing anything, sometimes there's scams related to products being sold online that, again, might be too good to be true. Always research that company before ordering those products, and you can find out a lot of information online. And especially if you are really interested in purchasing something, really look at what their refund and exchange policies are, because sometimes you have companies that will trick you into purchasing something, get you into some crazy subscription that you can't get out of. Not trusting calls or emails that may appear legitimate and even might say or state that they come from a government entity, especially when they are asking for your personal information as well as money up front. Always question those things. And I thought the FTC had a great suggestion. If something like that comes your way via phone call, or it could even be a text message, actually talk to someone about it. Mention it to someone. Don't react right away, because usually that can deter you from getting into a bad situation. And maybe a couple more, and we'll see if you have any other questions. Definitely avoid paying upfront fees for anything, and always evaluate your payment options. Meaning, if you think about payment with a credit card, typically you have some very good protection with a credit card if a fraudulent activity were to happen. But sometimes you see some of these schemes asking for money via a wire service. Always think twice about that, because anytime you do send money via wire, it's nearly impossible to be able to retrieve that if you didn't intend it to go where it should have been. And of course, be wary of free offerings. Again, if it looks too good to be true, it likely is, and that's a good way of these fraudsters kind of luring you into potentially a bad situation. So those are a few that come to mind.
Yeah, and we've seen that there's been, when it comes to fraud, in the recent years, there's been a lot of help when financial institutions can educate consumers.
Yes.
So what are some things that financial institutions can do specifically for their Hispanic American consumers?
Yes. Well, likely, if your credit union is already serving this market, you may have bilingual staff. Definitely include this topic in your training for bilingual staff. Give your folks an opportunity to have these discussions, to even practice some of the terminology around fraud in Spanish, I would say would be a good suggestion. That way, as they're able to provide one-on-one education as folks are opening accounts, or maybe they're getting a credit card for the first time, those are good opportunities to provide a nugget or two around how to prevent fraud. And in addition, the more information you have out there for your consumers, the better. So if you have a Spanish website, again, link to the FTC's Spanish website. print resources for your staff, handouts. Again, there's all sorts of brochures and kind of one-pagers that you can hand out to your members at a given point, again, when they're opening accounts or getting a product for the first time. And of course, include this content in your newsletters and any Spanish communications. Whatever you have in English, likely, if you're serving Hispanic Americans, Spanish speakers, you could also have that content in Spanish and provide it to your members.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the tips and suggestions. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at falconteam@tmg.global.